If you want to change your life, you must first change your standards. And if you want to change your standards, you must first reprogram your mind. This is the truth the masses ignore. And this is the truth you must engrave into your thinking from this moment forward. Success does not respond to chance. It responds to standards. The individual who commands excellence from himself will rise to meet it. The one who tolerates mediocrity will live buried in it. If you want more wealth, more respect, more clarity, you must raise the internal thermostat that governs your identity. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you believe you deserve. And your belief system is the product of programming, repeated thoughts, repeated emotions, repeated habits. So if your life is below what you desire, your first responsibility is not to hustle harder. It is to investigate what mental programming created the ceiling you now live under. Every human being lives within the walls of his own belief system. The invisible architecture of thought determines what he will attempt, what he will expect, and what he will tolerate. And here is where most people go wrong. They try to build a mansion on the foundation of a shack. They read a motivational quote, attend a seminar, feel good for a moment, but never take the time to excavate and remove the deeply embedded beliefs that are sabotaging them. If at the root you believe you are unworthy of wealth, you will unconsciously repel it. If you were raised in an environment that praised survival over success, then ambition will feel unnatural until you rewrite that script. You must reprogram the mind to align with the outcomes you desire. And that reprogramming is not done through wishful thinking. It is done through repetition, discipline, and internal confrontation. You must challenge the old voice, install a new one, and reinforce it until it dominates your consciousness. Understand this. Your subconscious mind is always listening. It obeys without judgment. Whatever is repeated, whether positive or negative, gets embedded as truth. If you repeat failure, defeat, self-doubt, scarcity, that becomes your operating system. But the opposite is also true. If you flood your mind with new thoughts, higher beliefs, and elevated standards, the subconscious eventually accepts them as law. You begin to think differently, speak differently, act differently. And those new behaviors produce new results. But it starts with the seed, your thoughts. The disciplined thinker becomes the architect of his reality. He doesn't hope for better outcome. He installs them through mental command. And that command starts with one question. What have I been tolerating from myself that I must never tolerate again? Every advancement in your life will begin the moment you raise your standard and say, no more. No more excuses. No more distractions. No more average habits. That decision alone separates the successful from the stagnant, because the world does not give you what you wish for. It gives you what you demand from yourself. That demand comes not from arrogance, but from identity. When you identify as a man of high standards, you naturally reject environments, conversations, behaviors, and associations that fall beneath it. That is power. Not brute force, but disciplined refusal. You must refuse to remain the version of yourself that settles. Because every time you settle, you reinforce a message that this is all you're worth. But when you reject it, when you hold yourself to more, you begin to rewire the mind to expect more, attract more, and achieve more. The first step to reprogramming the mind is self-awareness. You must become brutally honest with your current mental operating system. What thoughts dominate your day? What language do you speak to yourself in private? What do you believe about money, success, love, purpose? Most of these beliefs were formed before you had the ability to choose. You inherited them from family, from school, from society. But here is the liberating truth. Just because you inherited them doesn't mean you must keep them. You can audit every belief. You can question every thought. And the moment you question it, you weaken its hold. When you say, "Is this belief serving my highest good?" and the answer is no, you now have power. Power to replace it with something stronger. And it is through that consistent replacement that the reprogramming begins. The second step is repetition. Nothing becomes part of your subconscious without repetition. One affirmation is not enough. One powerful thought is not enough. You must immerse your mind daily in the ideas, words, and images that represent your new standard. Read every day. Speak affirmations with authority. Visualize the outcomes you desire as if they already exist. The mind, when fed with intensity and frequency, cannot distinguish between reality and imagination. That is why imagination is not childish, it is powerful. When you repeatedly visualize success, confidence, abundance, your mind begins to accept it as normal. And when that happens, you act in alignment with that vision. Action becomes effortless. Not because life is easier, but because your belief system supports the behavior. The third step is emotional leverage. You must link deep emotion to your new standards. Logic will not change your life. Emotion will. When you emotionally commit to the new version of yourself, your nervous system begins to respond. The change becomes visceral. You must feel disgusted by mediocrity. You must feel obsessed with excellence. You must feel aligned with your destiny so deeply that anything less becomes unacceptable. That emotion creates drive, and that drive overcomes resistance. Don't just write new affirmations, feel them. Don't just read success principles, live them. Walk like the man you are becoming. Speak like him. Think like him. Decide like him. And over time, the gap between who you were and who you become begins to close. And yet, you must not mistake speed for power. Reprogramming is not about overnight transformation. It is about relentless, repeated, intentional effort. Some days you will doubt it. Some days you will regress. But every time you return to the standard, every time you remind yourself who you are becoming, you strengthen the foundation. That is how real growth happens. Quietly, internally, with no audience, no applause, just you and the standard you've chosen to live by. And as you honor it day after day, you evolve, your mind shifts, your emotions stabilize, your discipline sharpens, and the results begin to mirror the internal reality. That is not magic. That is principle. That is power. The truth I will give you in this: you are already capable. You are already worthy. You are already powerful. But none of that matters if your mind is programmed for less. So rise with urgency. Audit your thoughts. Rewrite your beliefs. And condition your mind to expect nothing but the highest from yourself. That is how greatness is built. That is how you attract wealth. That is how you command respect, not from others, but from yourself. And when you respect yourself, the world follows. Once you accept the truth that your external reality is a direct mirror of your internal standard, you can no longer hide behind excuses. The man who complains about his outcomes is the man who refuses to confront his thoughts. You are not poor because opportunity passed you by. You are not stuck because the world is unfair. You are where you are because your dominant beliefs have authorized your circumstances. And that truth, though uncomfortable, is your salvation. because what you can take responsibility for, you can change. The greatest power a man can claim is the ability to re-engineer his own thoughts. That means no longer thinking like the crowd, no longer speaking like the defeated, no longer acting like the version of yourself that craves comfort. Instead, think like the man who's already free. Speak like the man who commands respect. Act like the man whose standards leave no room for compromise. You must eliminate the illusion that higher standards require harder effort. The truth is the opposite. A low standard creates more struggle. A man with low standards tolerates messy habits, chaotic environments, broken promises, inconsistent action, and every one of those things creates friction, stress, delay, rework, pain. On the surface, it feels easier to accept less, but it costs more in the long run. When you set a high standard, you eliminate 90% of the problems the average man wrestles with. Why? Because you don't invite them into your life. You don't wait for inspiration to act. You don't justify laziness with clever language. You show up. You deliver. You do the work. And because you do the work without question, your life gains momentum. That momentum builds power. And power, when applied consistently, creates mastery. The disciplined man doesn't have fewer temptations. He just has fewer permissions. He doesn't allow every emotion to run the show. He doesn't give every urge an audience. He knows that every compromise of standard is a step backward from destiny. So he builds walls around his mind. He guards his inputs. He filters his thoughts. He rewires his inner voice to speak like a commander, not a beggar. And from that internal strength, external results begin to flow. This is the part most miss. Success does not begin with a bank balance or an opportunity. It begins with an internal shift, a standard that becomes non-negotiable, a decision to never again operate beneath a certain level of thinking, speaking, and behaving. That is where reprogramming becomes permanent, not in moments of motivation, but in moments of principle. Now let me tell you something crucial. Environment matters. You cannot reprogram your mind while living in the same environment that created your limitations. This doesn't always mean changing your physical location. It means upgrading your inputs, the conversations you entertain, the media you consume, the voices you allow into your ears. Garbage in, garbage out. Power in, power out. If you want to live above the noise, you must stop absorbing it. Fill your space with the voices of discipline, wealth, greatness, purpose. Read daily. Reflect often. Surround yourself with individuals who mirror the standards you are stepping into, not those who drag you back to who you were. The man who masters his environment masters his life, because the environment is not just physical, it is mental. Guard it like your future depends on it, because it does. Reprogramming also requires solitude, silence, space to think. The average man never pauses long enough to examine what he believes. He moves from task to task, input to input, never realizing he is living by a script written by someone else. You must retreat from the noise to hear your own voice again. The voice of your higher self, the one that demands greatness, the one that sees past circumstance, the one that whispers, "This is not who you were born to be." In silence, that voice grows louder. And the louder it becomes, the weaker your old programming gets. Make solitude a ritual. Think in the morning. Reflect at night. Write your thoughts. Speak your intentions. Program your mind the way an engineer programs a machine. with precision, repetition, and clarity. One of the most powerful tools for reprogramming is self-talk. Not the passive, mindless chatter of the average person, but intentional, directed speech. You must learn to speak to yourself like a general before battle. Every morning, command your mind. Declare who you are. Declare what you expect. Declare what you will tolerate and what you will never tolerate again. Speak with certainty. Your subconscious is always listening. It believes whatever voice is loudest. And when your voice becomes louder than your past, louder than your pain, louder than the opinions of the world, you become unstoppable. This is not theory. This is law. What you repeatedly tell yourself, you will believe. And what you believe, you will act upon. And what you act upon, you will become. That is the process. Do not neglect it. Another truth you must accept is this. Your mind already has a program, and it's running 24 hours a day. The only question is whether you wrote it or inherited it. If you don't choose your standard, the world will assign one to you. And the world's standard is mediocrity. It is conformity. It is emotional reactivity. That is why most men live below their potential. They are running a mental operating system designed for survival, not success. If you want more, you must design it, word by word, thought by thought, habit by habit, repetition by repetition. That is how a new program takes root, not by wishing for it, but by building it, daily, relentlessly, intentionally, until it becomes second nature. Until you no longer have to remind yourself to think like a winner, because that's who you are. Now I must speak to you about identity. Your standard is directly linked to how you see yourself. And how you see yourself is a product of your past programming. That's why you must interrupt the pattern. You must no longer say, I've always been this way. That's not identity, that's conditioning. And conditioning can be changed. Start with a new identity statement. I am the kind of man who shows up daily. I am the kind of man who builds wealth. I am the kind of man who speaks truth, lives purpose, commands respect. The more you speak it, the more you believe it. The more you believe it, the more you act like it. And the more you act like it, the faster the old identity dies. Kill it, mourn it if you must, but do not drag it into your future. It has no place there. And remember, your results are not the measure of your potential. They are the reflection of your standards. Raise the standard, and the results must rise to meet it. That is not opinion, that is cause and effect. If you act like a man who deserves success, think like him, live like him, speak like him, then success has no choice but to manifest. Not because you begged for it, but because you aligned with it. Reprogramming your mind is not just a mental exercise. It is a spiritual commitment. You are not just changing thoughts. You are changing identity, changing destiny, changing legacy. And that change begins today with the decision to no longer tolerate the old and to fully embrace the new. Let the world watch. Let them doubt. Let them mock. You will not flinch. You are too focused, too aligned, too elevated to engage with noise. You've raised the standard. You've installed the new program. And now you live by it, ruthlessly, fearlessly, consistently. That is how you change a life. That is how you reprogram a mind. That is how you earn respect, not just from others, but from yourself. The moment a man elevates his standard, he begins to attract opportunities he once thought were beyond his reach. not because the opportunities weren't there before, but because he could not see them with the mindset he previously occupied. The eyes are not just organs of vision, they are extensions of belief. You do not see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. And if your standard is low, your perception will filter out everything that contradicts your limitations. This is why two men can stand in the same room. One sees a ceiling, the other sees a doorway. The only difference is the lens of the mind. And that lens is shaped by your standards. Raise it, and your reality reshapes itself before your eyes. You must now train yourself to respond to difficulty in a new way. The average man sees adversity as a wall. The elevated man sees it as a mirror, a reflection of the work that still needs to be done within. Obstacles are not indicators of failure. They are invitations to reinforce the standard. When things go wrong, do not drop your expectations to meet the moment. Instead, elevate your energy to meet your expectation. That is the sign of a reprogrammed mind. The weak man reacts. The disciplined man responds with intention, with clarity, with alignment to his principles. Every difficulty is a test of loyalty to your new standard. Pass it and you rise. Fail it and you default back into the ordinary. This is the battlefield. And your weapon is self-command. Reprogramming your mind for higher standards also means redefining what success looks like, not based on the world's applause, but based on your internal scoreboard. You must become your own judge, jury, and witness. Stop measuring yourself by the likes, by the dollars, by the validations of men who lack your vision. Instead, ask yourself daily, did I show up like the man I said I would be? If the answer is yes, that is victory. That is alignment. And alignment over time builds results that no man can take from you. When you build from the inside out, your success is immune to chaos. It's not situational, it's foundational. That is what makes you unshakable. Let me give you a law that will serve you well. The law of consistent elevation. Every day you either rise to your standard or fall to your feelings. Most fall. They wake up tired, and so they delay. They get criticized, and so they shrink. They get uncomfortable, and so they retreat. But the man who operates by principle, not emotion, is the one who ascends. He is not perfect, but he is unrelenting. He may feel the resistance, but he never negotiates with it. Why? Because his standard is not up for debate. It is written. It is sealed. It is final. That is the kind of man the world follows. That is the kind of man success respects. That is the kind of man you must now become. Understand this. Your future is not waiting to be discovered, it is waiting to be deserved. And you earn it not through occasional brilliance, but through daily discipline. You may not always feel motivated. That's irrelevant. Motivation is a mood. Standards are mandates. And when your life is built on mandates, your performance is no longer tied to feeling. You do the work because it is who you are, not because it is convenient. That identity, the one rooted in consistency, is what separates the leaders from the lost. The man who only acts when it feels good will live a life that never gets good. But the man who acts from decision, from principle, from vision, he builds a life that others envy but few can imitate. And while we're speaking of envy, let's be clear. You will be misunderstood. You will be judged. When you raise your standard, you expose the mediocrity of those around you, and many won't like what that mirror reflects. Do not shrink. Do not apologize. Do not bend your vision to make others feel safe in their comfort zones. The man who reprograms his mind must also reprogram his relationships. If they don't rise with you, they will resent you. And that's their burden to bear, not yours. Protect your focus. Honor your growth. And if necessary, walk alone until you find those who walk in alignment. Your destiny is not up for a vote. It is up to you. Another principle to engrave in your mind is this: repetition creates reality. If you want to reprogram your mind, you must become obsessed with repetition. Not random repetition, but strategic, intentional, principle-based repetition. Read the same truths until they shape your thoughts. Speak the same affirmations until they command your actions. Practice the same habits until they forge your character. This is how men are made. Not in flashes of greatness, but in the grind of repetition. The world respects the man who outlasts his former self. And that kind of endurance is built one choice at a time, over and over again, until the old identity has no place left to hide. Now let's speak of vision. You cannot sustain a high standard without a compelling vision. The man with no vision will fall in love with comfort. The man with vision sees comfort as the enemy. Why? Because comfort slows motion. And motion is what builds momentum. Your vision must be so clear, so strong, so magnetic, that it pulls you forward even when your energy is low. Write it down. Speak it out loud. Build it in your mind until it becomes more real than your current circumstance. That is the secret of the successful. They live in the future while acting in the present. They do not move according to sight. They move according to belief. That's what vision does. It fuels action before the results ever arrive. But beware. Without discipline, vision becomes fantasy. That's why every vision must be married to a standard. It's easy to dream about wealth, but are you willing to live like the man who earns it? It's easy to desire respect, but are you willing to show up like the man who commands it? Standards turn wishes into reality. Every time you say, "This is who I am," you must back it up with action. Otherwise, you're not reprogramming, you're rehearsing self-deception. And self-deception is the fastest way to stay stuck. Be ruthless with your accountability. Hold yourself to the fire. Because the man who avoids hard truths builds a life on weak foundations. And weak foundations crumble under pressure. Let's speak of pressure for a moment. Pressure is not your enemy. Pressure is your forge. The higher your standard, the more pressure you will feel. But that pressure is shaping you. It's burning off weakness. It's polishing your discipline. It's refining your resolve. The man who embraces pressure becomes a diamond in a world full of dust. But you must lean into it. Not fear it. Not fight it. Not complain about it. Embrace it. Welcome it. Say, "This is the price of my next level, and I am willing to pay it." That mindset is rare. That mindset is royal. That mindset builds legacies. And legacies are not built by the faint of heart. Finally, understand this. Reprogramming your mind is not a single event. It is a lifelong practice. The moment you stop growing, your old programming returns. It waits in the shadows, ready to reclaim its throne. You must remain vigilant daily. You must wake up with intention. You must speak with clarity. You must act with integrity. And when you fail, and you will, you must rise faster than before. Why? Because your standard demands it. Because your vision commands it. Because your destiny is watching. And every day you live beneath it, you delay the life you were born to live. So sharpen your focus, fortify your habits, raise your voice, and walk like a man who has already become the one he was always meant to be. That is the path. That is the practice. That is the power of a reprogrammed mind. Now that we've uncovered the foundation of reprogramming the mind through repetition, vision, and discipline, let us now direct our focus to an equally critical principle: environment. A man cannot think higher than the soil he plants himself in. If you attempt to nurture a powerful mind in a weak environment, the soil will choke the seed. You must understand this truth. Your surroundings are not neutral. They are either reinforcing your old standards or fertilizing the new one. If your environment whispers excuses, you will eventually echo them. If your environment praises mediocrity, you will begin to believe that excellence is arrogance. Do not be fooled by familiarity. What is comfortable is often corrosive to your growth. A man seeking elevation must uproot himself from environments that feed his complacency. You must curate your world as ruthlessly as you curate your goals. What you tolerate around you will eventually shape what you tolerate within you. Build an environment that demands more from you than your past self ever did. Surround yourself with people who talk in terms of vision, not gossip. Walk with those who move with purpose, not hesitation. Read books that challenge your beliefs, not just affirm them. Design your physical space to remind you who you are becoming. What do you see when you wake up? What words greet your eyes? What sounds fill your ears? These things are programming your subconscious. You may think they're insignificant, but they are shaping your future. Every input is an instruction. Every repetition becomes reinforcement. So the man who seeks to reprogram his mind must become the architect of his environment. Leave nothing to chance. Leave nothing to the mediocre hands of randomness. Shape your space, and it will shape you back. Let us now speak of language, the most underestimated tool in mental reprogramming. Your words are not casual, they are commands. When you speak, you tell your subconscious what to expect, what to accept, and what to reject. The man who says, "I'm trying," is programming struggle. The man who says, "I am doing," is programming action. Speak with finality. Speak with authority. Replace weak words with decisive declarations. Do not say, "I hope," say, "I will." Do not say, "someday," say, "this day." Your mouth is the pen that writes the story your life will follow. So speak only what you want to see. Speak not from your current circumstances, but from your desired standards. This is how the mind adapts. It hears, it obeys, and it constructs accordingly. But you must also guard against the language of others. The voices you allow into your mind will either strengthen your new identity or sabotage it. Some people will plant seeds of doubt under the disguise of realism. Some will call your new standards too much. Some will whisper warnings of failure when you declare your intention to rise. Do not drink from poisoned wells. The opinions of small minds are loud but irrelevant. You are not reprogramming your mind to fit into their narrative. You are writing a new one, and that narrative is sacred. So protect your ears. Limit your exposure to doubt. If someone's voice doesn't align with your vision, mute it. Your mind is your responsibility. Guard it like a king guards his kingdom. Now let us speak about identity, the cornerstone of transformation. Until you change who you believe you are, you will never sustain a higher standard. You cannot outperform the identity you've accepted. So if you want to live a new life, you must believe you are the kind of man who lives that life. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. Identity is not about pretending. It is about choosing. Decide who you are and behave accordingly. That decision must be made daily. Every action either affirms or erodes your chosen identity. Do not ask, do I feel like it today? Ask, what would the man I've chosen to be do in this moment? Then do it without hesitation, without negotiation. That is identity in action. That is reprogramming at its highest level. Understand this. Identity is not built in the moment of motivation. It is forged in the fires of resistance. When your body says rest, but your standard says rise, your response determines who you really are. When the temptation to regress knocks, but you stay true to your new principles, your identity is strengthened. Every battle is an opportunity to choose who leads, your past self or your elevated self. The more you choose the latter, the more permanent the transformation becomes. Eventually, what was once a stretch becomes your new baseline. What once felt extraordinary becomes your ordinary. That is how higher standards become effortless. Through identity, through choice, through repetition. There is another principle to embed deep into your subconscious. Feedback is fuel. A man seeking higher standards must become obsessed with feedback, not for validation, but for refinement. The average man avoids critique. The extraordinary man invites it. He knows that correction is not condemnation, it is construction. If someone exposes a blind spot, he doesn't get defensive, he gets diligent. He studies it. He strengthens it. He uses it to rise. This is the posture of greatness. Humble enough to learn, disciplined enough to apply, and bold enough to evolve. Feedback is not a judgment, it is a mirror. Look into it without fear. It shows you where your standard is still leaking. Fix the leaks. Fortify the structure. And you become unshakable. Now, let's bring our attention to decisiveness. Reprogramming your mind for higher standards requires eliminating the disease of indecision. Indecision is the language of a fragmented mind. The man who cannot choose cannot change. The man who hesitates stagnates. You must train yourself to make decisions quickly, clearly, and without emotional clutter. Study your values. Define your standards, and let them govern your decision. This is how you gain internal harmony. Every choice becomes a vote for the man you are becoming. Every delay is a vote for the man you were. Choose wisely. Choose boldly. And never apologize for choosing in alignment with your vision. One of the most powerful habits to reinforce this internal power is the practice of daily declarations. Wake up each day and declare who you are. Declare your standard. Declare your mission. Declare your intent. Speak it into the mirror until it becomes embedded into your nervous system. Say it with your chest. Say it until there is no contradiction between your words and your actions. This simple habit, repeated with intensity, will begin to rewire your emotional state. It will eliminate self-doubt. It will neutralize hesitation. It will harden your resolve. And that resolve becomes your compass, no matter the weather outside. Speak your future. Walk your standard. Live your identity. Let us also not forget the power of energy management. A man cannot operate at high standards if he is constantly depleted. Reprogramming your mind also means reprogramming your energy systems. What you eat, how you sleep, how you move, who you engage with, all of this impacts your mental clarity and emotional power. You cannot run a high-performance engine on low-quality fuel. Your body is the vehicle of your mind. Take care of it like a machine designed for greatness. Wake early. Move daily. Rest strategically. Eat intentionally. The man who neglects his vessel cannot carry the weight of a higher standard. So be ruthless in your self-care, not for comfort, but for capacity. Because your capacity determines how far you can carry your vision. And now we must address one final immutable law, the law of congruence. A man cannot live out of alignment with his standard without consequences. When your thoughts, words, and actions are misaligned, you feel dissonance. You feel doubt. You feel internal resistance. But when all three, thought, word, and deed, are in perfect harmony, you become magnetic. You attract success because you are success. You draw respect because you live respectably. You generate results because you have become the cause. This is what it means to reprogram your mind. To live in such alignment that even your presence speaks louder than your words. This is power. This is mastery. This is manhood. And so I leave you now with this reminder. The work is never finished. Each day presents new opportunities to rise or regress. Each moment is a fork in the road. But the man who reprograms his mind to expect more, demand more, and produce more, he no longer fears the path. He owns it. He walks it with intention. He builds not for applause, but for legacy. And that legacy begins with a decision to think higher, to choose better, to live disciplined, to expect greatness, not as a fantasy, but as a fact waiting to be claimed. You are that man. You were always meant to be. And now, the only question that remains is, will you live as him? Will you rise tomorrow, not with intention alone, but with implementation? Will you speak your truth not in theory, but in action? Because the man who reprograms his mind for higher standards does not walk timidly into his destiny. He walks like it already belongs to him. He wakes like it's already unfolding. He works like the outcome is inevitable. And here's why. It is. The universe bows to the man who refuses to betray his higher self. Every principle you've applied, every habit you've built, every standard you've raised has been laying bricks on a road that leads exactly where you've envisioned. But the road only appears beneath the feet of those who keep walking. That is the secret. That is the code. That is the key. Movement without excuse and faith without wavering. It is not about motivation anymore. It is not about waiting for the perfect morning or the most inspiring words. It is about you becoming the generator of that power. You are no longer the man who needs to be reminded. You are now the man who reminds others. And how do you remind them? Not with words, but with presence, with discipline, with consistency. You remind them that higher standards are possible by being the living embodiment of them. That is how influence is born. That is how legacies are written, not in ink, but in example. You are the living manuscript of what reprogramming looks like. You are the message that others will one day quote. And it all began the day you refused to settle for the old software, the day you deleted doubt, uninstalled mediocrity, and downloaded mastery. But let us go one level deeper still, into the realm of spiritual responsibility. The man who elevates his standard must understand that his power is not for himself alone. His growth is not selfish, it is sacred. Because when you rise, you give others permission to do the same. When you embody higher standards, you become a light in a world addicted to shadows. And though they may not thank you, though some may even resent your example, it doesn't matter. Because the truth is this: Your responsibility is not to their comfort, but to your calling. And your calling is to rise every single day. Not because it's easy, not because it's glamorous, but because it is required of men like you, of warriors of standard, of kings who don't need thrones to act royal. You walk like a king because you've mastered yourself, and that self-mastery becomes your crown. Now let us speak of longevity. It is not enough to elevate once. You must sustain. You must build a rhythm that never breaks. Momentum is not a gift. It is a system. And systems are born from discipline. You don't need more willpower. You need better structure. Reprogramming the mind requires you to set your life in such deliberate alignment that deviation becomes harder than discipline. Make excellence your default setting. Automate greatness. Wake at the same time. Reflect at the same time. Move your body. Sharpen your mind. Revisit your goals. Speak your standards. You do this not because you're weak, but because you're wise. The man who wins long-term doesn't do it through bursts. He does it through rhythm. So build yours. Honor it and protect it from anything that would break your beat. Because the truth is this: when your rhythm becomes stronger than your emotion, nothing can stop you. No opinion, no failure, no fatigue. Because you are no longer guided by mood, you are governed by mission. And mission men don't wait for conditions. They create them. They forge pathways in darkness. They find power in repetition. They build when others sleep. They think when others react. They lead, not for applause, but because their integrity will not allow them to follow mediocrity. That is the standard. That is the man. And that man, he does not crumble. He does not bend. He does not explain. He simply rises every day without question, without compromise, without delay. And so I ask you, are you ready to live like that man? Not in spurts, not in moments, but permanently. Are you ready to make this your normal, not your peak? Because higher standards aren't about performance. They're about identity. They're about living in such alignment with excellence that anything less feels like a betrayal. They're about waking up each day and knowing this is who I am, not who I'm trying to be, not who I hope to become, but who I am. Now, here. Today, that is the reprogrammed mind. That is the recalibrated spirit. And that is what separates the average from the unstoppable. Do not let this momentum fade. Don't close this chapter and return to old codes. You must burn the bridge to your former life. Because you've tasted power now, you've seen what's possible when a man rewires his thoughts, upgrades his standards, and leads himself with ruthless precision. So now, there can be no going back. There can be no lowering of the bar. Because now, every time you compromise, it will taste like poison. It will feel like regression. And you'll know deep in your bones you were made for more. So live like it. Speak like it. Walk like it. Think like it. And let no man, no doubt, no failure, and no delay convince you otherwise. You are not who you were. You are not limited by your past. You are not defined by your mistakes. You are rebuilt, rewired, realigned, and ready. Ready to live the life only men of higher standards can live. Not someday, but today, right now. Not when the world applauds, but when no one is watching. That's where the real man emerges. That's where the real transformation happens. Not in public, but in private. In the silence, in the sweat, in the stillness of a man who decided, this is who I am now. So don't wait for approval. Don't wait for momentum. Don't wait for motivation. You are the source. You are the spark. And now, you are the standard. Stay sharp. Stay focused. Stay consistent. Repetition is your sword. Discipline is your shield. And vision is your crown. Walk tall. Walk relentless. Walk with authority. The world will follow. Because the man who shows up with higher standards commands attention, not by noise, but by presence. And from this moment forward, you are that man.